A 75,000-year-old Neanderthal skull made up of more than 100 fragments of bone has been painstakingly put back together.
Buried for over 10,000 years in a Nevada cave, a mummy lay forgotten until scientists unlocked his DNA. What they found shattered everything we thought we knew about the first Americans. This isn't just ancient history, it's a genetic bombshell. Join us as we unravel the mystery of the Spirit Cave mummy, the discovery of the oldest mummy. The story of the Spirit Cave mummy starts when it was found in a small rocky alcove in Nevada's Great Basin Desert. But it wasn't until 50 years later that new tests revealed its true age, giving it the title of the world's oldest natural mummy, one preserved only by natural processes. The Falun Paiute Shoshone tribe claimed a cultural connection to the mummy and asked for its remains to be returned under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. However, the U.S. Bureau of Land Management denied their request. This led the tribe to sue the government, igniting a debate that lasted 2 decades about what should happen to the mummy. The tribe sought a proper burial for someone they believed to be one of their ancestors, while anthropologists argued that the remains offered priceless historical information and should be exhibited in a museum. The two parties were stuck in a deadlock until 2015, when the tribe consented to let Professor Eske Willerslev, the lead author of the study, perform genomic testing on the mummy. A legal dispute was concluded after advanced DNA sequencing revealed its connection to a Native American tribe. This finding was released as part of a comprehensive international study that genetically examined the DNA of several well-known and controversial ancient remains throughout North and South America, including Spirit Cave, the Lovelock skeletons, the Lagoa Santa remains, an Inca mummy, and the oldest remains found in Chilean Patagonia. The research also investigated the second oldest human remains from Trail Creek Cave in Alaska, which included a 9,000-year-old milk tooth from a young girl. Researchers sequenced 15 ancient genomes from Alaska to Patagonia, allowing them to trace the movements of the first humans as they rapidly spread across the Americas during the Ice Age, as well as how they interacted with one another in the subsequent millennia. The group of scholars not only found that the Spirit Cave remains, recognized as the world's oldest natural mummy, belonged to a Native American, but also disproved a long-held theory suggesting that a group known as Paleo-Americans inhabited North America prior to the arrival of Native Americans. The groundbreaking research also found hints of a mysterious Australasian genetic signal in the 10,400-year-old Lagoa Santa remains from Brazil, which revealed a previously unknown group of early South Americans. However, the Australasian connection left no genetic evidence in North America. One of the scientists described it as extraordinary evidence of an extraordinary chapter in human history. Professor Eske Willerslev, who is affiliated with both St. John's College at the University of Cambridge and the University of Copenhagen, led the study. He stated that Spirit Cave and Lagoa Santa were very controversial because they were labeled as Paleo-Americans based on craniometry. It was found that the shape of their skulls differed from that of present-day Native Americans. Their research shows that Spirit Cave and Lagoa Santa were actually genetically closer to modern Native Americans than to any other ancient or contemporary group sequenced so far. The Lagoa Santa remains were collected by Danish explorer Peter W. Lund in the 19th century, and his work contributed to the Paleo-American hypothesis based on cranial morphology, which suggested that the well-known group of skeletons could not be Native Americans. However, this new study refutes that theory, and the findings were announced under embargo by Professor Willerslev, alongside representatives from the Brazilian National Museum in Rio on Tuesday, November 6, 2018. He stated, "Examining the bumps and contours of a head doesn't really help you grasp the actual genetic background of a group. We've shown that people can look quite different, yet be closely related." The importance of the Spirit Cave, discovered in 1940 in a small rocky nook in the Great Basin Desert, wasn't fully recognized for 50 years. Initially, the preserved remains of a man in his 40s were thought to be around 1,500 to 2,000 years old. But in the 1990s, new tests on textiles and hair revealed that the skeleton was actually 10,600 years old. The Falun Paiute Shoshone tribe, a Native American group located in Nevada near Spirit Cave, asserted their cultural connection to the skeleton and requested that the remains be returned immediately under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. This request was denied due to disputed ancestry. leading the tribe to sue the federal government. The lawsuit created a conflict between tribal leaders and anthropologists, who contended that the remains offered crucial information about North America's earliest inhabitants and should remain on display in a museum. The stalemate lasted for 20 years, until the tribe consented to allow Professor Wilslev to perform genome sequencing on DNA taken from the Spirit Cave for the first time. Professor Wilslev remarked that he promised the tribe that his team would not conduct the DNA testing without their approval, and it was agreed that if the Spirit Cave was found to be genetically Native American, the mummy would be returned to the tribe. The team carefully extracted DNA from the petrous bone located inside the skull, confirming that the skeleton is an ancestor of today's Native Americans. Spirit Cave was returned to the tribe in 2016. A private reburial ceremony took place which Professor Wilslev attended, with details just recently being shared. The geneticist shared that what became very clear to him was that it was a deeply emotional and deeply cultural event. The tribe has strong feelings for the Spirit Cave mummy, which can be hard to grasp from a European perspective. But for others, it would be similar to burying their mother, father, sister, or brother. People can all picture how it would feel if their parents were displayed in an exhibition, and they have that same sentiment for Spirit Cave. Throughout the 2-year project, the tribe was kept in the loop, and 2 members even visited the lab in Copenhagen to meet the scientists and were present during the DNA sampling. A statement from the Falun Paiute Shoshone tribe said that the tribe has had a lot of experience with members of the scientific community, mostly negative. However, there are a few scientists who seem to understand their perspective, and S.K. Wilslev is one of them. He took the time to get to know the tribe, kept them well informed about the process, and was available to answer their questions. His new study confirms what they had always known from their oral tradition and other evidence, that the man taken from his final resting place in Spirit Cave is their Native American ancestor. The genome of the Spirit Cave skeleton is important because it not only resolved the legal and cultural conflict between the tribe and the government, but it also shed light on how ancient humans migrated and settled throughout the Americas. Scientists managed to trace the movement of populations from Alaska all the way down to Patagonia. They often split up and took risks traveling in small, isolated groups. Dr. David Meltzer from the Department of Anthropology at Southern Methodist University in Dallas stated, "One remarkable aspect of the analysis of Spirit Cave and Lagoa Santa is their close genetic relationship, which suggests that their ancestral population moved across the continent at an incredible pace. We've suspected this based on archaeological evidence, but it's exciting to have it validated by genetic data. These results indicate that the first peoples were exceptionally adept at navigating quickly through a completely new and empty landscape. They had an entire continent to explore and were covering vast distances at an astonishing speed. Additionally, the study uncovered unexpected traces of Australasian ancestry in ancient South American Native Americans, but no genetic connection to Australasians was found in North American Native Americans. Dr. Victor Moreno-Mayer, who is with the Center for Geogenetics at the University of Copenhagen and the lead author of the study, stated that they found that the Australasian genetic signal was not present in Native Americans before the split between the Spirit Cave and Lagoa Santa populations. This suggests that groups with this genetic marker were either already in South America when Native Americans arrived, or that Australasian groups came later. The fact that this signal hasn't been recorded in North America before indicates that an earlier group with it may have vanished, or a later group passed through North America without leaving any genetic evidence. Dr. Peter de Barros Damgaard, also from the Center for Geogenetics at the University of Copenhagen, discussed why scientists are both confused and hopeful about the Australasian ancestry signal found in South America. He said that if they consider that the route taken by those with Australasian ancestry to reach South America went through North America, then either the carriers of this genetic signal arrived as a structured population and went directly to South America, where they later mixed with new groups, or they came in at a later time. Presently, they can't determine which scenario is accurate, which presents the scientists with remarkable evidence of a fascinating chapter in human history. But we will figure out this mystery. The history of the population after the first settlements was way more complicated than people used to think. The idea that the Americas were populated by groups moving from north to south with hardly any interaction after they settled was an oversimplification. According to the new genomic analysis from the study about 8,000 years ago, Native Americans started moving again, this time from Mesoamerica into both North and South America. Researchers discovered evidence of this migration in the genomes of all current indigenous populations in South America for which we have genomic data so far. Dr. Moreno-Mayer mentioned that the older genomes they studied not only provided insights into the first inhabitants of South America, but also established a foundation for recognizing a second wave of genetic ancestry that came from Mesoamerica in more recent times, which isn't clear from the archaeological findings. These Mesoamerican groups intermingled with the descendants of the earliest South Americans, leading to the majority of today's groups in the area. A related study published in Cell also looks into how the first humans moved into the Americas and spread throughout the continents. The researchers conducted genetic tests that revealed two previously unknown migrations from North to South America. Another study uncovers the evolutionary journey that one group of migrants took after they chose to settle in the high-altitude Andes Mountains. By examining a period from 7,000 years ago up until the first contact with Europeans, the team was able to pinpoint any physical adaptations the people underwent before Europeans arrived about 500 years ago. The recent surge of information about the earliest human inhabitants of the Americas is prompting archaeologists and anthropologists to reconsider their understanding of American history, and it's becoming evident that even more groundbreaking discoveries are still to come. Inside the darkness of Spirit Cave lay something no one expected, a human body mummified by nature and mystery. Who was this ancient soul? Let's find out. The Spirit Cave Mummy. The Spirit Cave mummy is recognized as the oldest human mummy discovered in North America. It was found in 1940 in Spirit Cave, which is located 13 miles east of Fallon, Nevada, United States, by the archaeological couple Sidney and Georgia Wheeler. When the remains were analyzed, they showed similarities to indigenous peoples from both North and South America, and in 2016 the remains were returned to the Fallon Paiute Shoshone tribe of Nevada. The Spirit Cave mummy was among the first to be dated using accelerated mass spectrometer radiocarbon dating. This discovery and its analysis provided significant insights and encouraged further research into the timeline of the Western Great Basin. The Wheelers, who were working for the Nevada State Parks Commission, were looking for potential archaeological sites to protect them from being lost due to guano mining. When they entered Spirit Cave, they found the remains of two individuals wrapped in tule matting. One set of remains, which was buried deeper than the other, had been partially mummified, specifically the head and right shoulder. This partially mummified person, the Spirit Cave mummy, was discovered wearing moccasins and wrapped in a rabbit skin blanket when they were placed there. The Wheelers, with help from local residents, managed to recover a total of 67 artifacts from the cave. These artifacts were studied at the Nevada State Museum, where they were first thought to be around 1,500 to 2,000 years old. They were kept at the storage facility of the Nevada State Museum in Carson City for the next 54 years. Spirit Cave is located in the foothills of the Stillwater Mountains. The Stillwater National Wildlife Refuge was created in this area. This site is northeast of Fallon, Nevada. Biological similarities between the remains found in Spirit Cave have shown a clear connection to remains found over a large geographic area, including the Wizard Beach Man and the Crypt Cave Dog Burial. In 1996, R. Irvie Taylor, an anthropologist from the University of California, Riverside, studied 17 artifacts from Spirit Cave using mass spectrometry. The results suggested that the mummy was about 9,400 years old, making it older than any other known mummy in North America. The Wheelers, who were working for the Nevada State Parks Commission, were looking into potential archaeological sites to stop them from being lost because of guano mining. When they entered Spirit Cave, they found the remains of two individuals wrapped in tule matting. One set of remains was buried deeper than the other and had been partially mummified, specifically the head and right shoulder. This partially mummified person, known as the Spirit Cave mummy, was discovered wearing moccasins and wrapped in a rabbit skin blanket when they were placed there. With help from local residents, the Wheelers managed to recover a total of 67 artifacts from the cave. These artifacts were taken to the Nevada State Museum. They were stored at the Nevada State Museum's facility in Carson City, where they stayed for the next 54 years. But the Spirit Cave mummy wasn't the only ancient mystery buried in North America. Thousands of miles away in Montana, another child of the past was waiting to be found, the Anzic child. Stay with us as we unravel the story of America's oldest known infant burial, the Anzic child. The genome of a skeleton from Montana known as the Anzic child is 12,000 years old and is the only other ancient genome from the Americas that has been published and is older than 10,000 years. Both the Spirit Cave remains and the Anzic child appear to be genetically more similar to South American groups than to certain North American groups, and the reasons for this migration pattern are still unclear, according to RAF. One theory is that both individuals lived before their local populations started to spread across different areas of the Americas, says population geneticist Pontus Skoglund from Harvard Medical School in Boston, Massachusetts. Anzic I was a young Paleo-Indian child, estimated to be between 1 and 2 years old, whose remains were discovered in south-central Montana, USA, in 1968. The child was found alongside over 115 tools made from stone and antlers and covered in red ochre, indicating a purposeful burial. Anzic I is the only human remains linked to the Clovis culture and represents the first complete ancient Native American genome to be sequenced. The paleogenomic study of the remains showed that they have Siberian roots and are genetically closer to modern Amerindians from Central and South America than to those from Northern America. The discovery of Anzic I and the following analysis sparked some debate. Since the remains were located on private property, the researchers didn't have to follow the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, NAGPRA, for their study. Still, some Native American tribal members in Montana believe they should have been consulted before the researchers analyzed the infant's skeleton and genome. According to Montana state law, there is a requirement to consult with Native Americans regarding the handling of ancient skeletal remains. After discussions, Anzic I was reburied on June 28, 2014, in the Shields River Valley during an intertribal ceremony. The many Clovis artifacts found with the original burial are kept at the Montana Historical Society in Helena, Montana. The Anzic site was unintentionally found by 2 construction workers in a collapsed rock shelter close to Wilsall, Montana, on private property. The remains were located on the Anzic family's ranch. Skull fragments of another individual, Anzic II, a child estimated to be around 6 to 8 years old, were also discovered at the site 20 feet east of Anzic I, which did not have ochre staining. Initially, it was believed that the 2 individuals lived at the same time, but later carbon dating showed that the skull fragments of Anzic II date back to about 9,530 to 9,600 years ago, making them several thousand years younger than Anzic I, and therefore unrelated to Anzic I and the Clovis artifacts. The tools discovered at the site seem to show signs of use, which suggests they weren't made just for the burial. The antler artifacts were shaped like rods, and at least some of them looked like they had been beveled. Similar rods have also been found at other sites related to the Clovis culture and Paleo-Indian groups. It is not known what the rods were used for, but they might have been used as foreshafts for attaching stone points. Genetic testing of the antler rods found with Anzic I shows that the antlers used to make these artifacts came from elk, marking some of the earliest evidence of elk in North America, south of the Laurentide ice sheet. The skeletal remains of Anzic I included 28 pieces of the skull, most of the calvaria, the left collarbone, and a few ribs. These bones were found in a very broken condition. However, some parts of the skull were pieced together, which helped estimate the age, check basic health signs, and gather some details about cultural practices. At first, researchers believed that the left collarbone showed signs of being cremated, but after more tests, it turned out that the discoloration was due to groundwater stains and not from fire. Moreover, all of Anzic I's remains were covered in ochre, which hides the natural color of the infant's bones. Because the remains of Anzic I were incomplete, it was impossible to determine the cause of death. The age at which a person passed away can be figured out using various skeletal indicators, such as the closure of cranial sutures, how teeth come in, the fusion rates of epiphyses on long bones, and more. Throughout a person's life, cranial bones join together along suture lines, which helps in estimating the age at which human remains were found. The small size and the absence of suture closure in Anzic I's skull indicated that this individual was between 1 and 2 years old. The metopic suture is also found in the frontal bone of Anzic 1. This suture is typically seen in most human babies but closes long before they reach adulthood. The existence of a frontal suture in Anzic 1's remains supports the age estimate of 1 to 2 years old. A group of researchers from the United States and Europe carried out paleogenetic studies on the Anzic 1 skeletal remains. They analyzed the mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, the complete nuclear DNA, and the Y chromosome, comparing these sequences with those of modern populations around the globe. The findings from these studies enabled the researchers to draw conclusions about ancient migration routes and how the Americas were populated. These studies showed that the individual was more closely related to Native Americans in Central and South America rather than to the people from the Canadian Arctic, which was previously thought to be the case. The Arctic people are different from Native Americans living further south, including those in lower North America and Central and South America. The infant was also linked to individuals from Siberia and Central Asia, who are believed to be the ancestors of the indigenous peoples in the Americas. This discovery backs up the idea that the Americas were populated by people coming from Asia across the Bering Strait. The genome of Anzic 1 was sequenced and studied to find specific mutations that could provide insights into the population history of today's Native Americans. Researchers compared Anzic 1's genome with over 50 Native American genomes, discovering that it was much more similar to these genomes than to any modern Eurasian population. Anzic 1's genome showed a closer relationship to 44 Native American groups from Central and South America compared to 7 Native American groups from North America. The samples from North America were limited because tribes in the United States have been hesitant to take part. Morten Rasmussen and Sarah L. Anzic, along with others, sequenced the mitochondrial DNA of Anzic 1 and discovered that this infant is a sign of an ancient migration from Siberia to North America. They identified that Anzic 1's mtDNA is part of the haplogroup D4H3A, which is considered a founder haplogroup that may indicate early coastal migration routes into the Americas. The D haplogroup is also present in today's Native American populations, creating a connection between Anzic 1 and modern Native Americans. Even though it is uncommon among most Native Americans in the US and Canada today, the D4H3A genes are more frequently found in the native populations of South America. This points to a more complex genetic history among Native Americans than was previously understood, suggesting an early split in their genetic lineage around 13,000 years ago. One theory proposes that after entering North America from Siberia, a group of the first Americans with the D4H3A lineage traveled south along the Pacific coast and eventually, over thousands of years, made their way into Central and South America. Another group may have headed inland, east of the Rocky Mountains, leading to the settlement of most of what is now known as the United States and Canada. The analysis of Anzic 1's mtDNA, nuclear DNA, and Y chromosome showed a strong genetic link to today's Native Americans and indicated that there was gene flow from Siberia to the Americas almost 13,000 years ago, which is earlier than previously believed. These results generally back the Beringia hypothesis regarding how the Americas were populated, while they also challenge the Solutrean hypothesis that suggests early Europeans migrated to the New World, a theory that had minimal academic backing even before Anzic 1's genome was sequenced. Examining the remains of ancient Native Americans is often seen as an ethical minefield, since it raises issues about who owns the past and how it should be interpreted. In the past, the remains of Native Americans were often dug up and studied without getting permission from or consulting with modern Native Americans. Thanks to the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which was enacted in 1990, U.S. law now safeguards the remains and artifacts of Native Americans that are found on federal land or held by institutions that get federal funding. This law mandates that remains and artifacts be returned to the tribes connected to them or their culture. When the remains of Anzic 1 were uncovered in 1968, various research teams analyzed them before they were eventually given back to the Anzic family. Sarah Anzic, the daughter of the Anzic family, became a genetic researcher. She wanted to perform genomic analysis on the Anzic 1 skeleton. However, she was careful because a previous situation involving the ancient remains of a Native American, known as Kennewick Man, had stirred up a lot of debate. The Baringa hypothesis is the widely accepted explanation for how the Americas were populated, suggesting that early Amerindians migrated from Siberia over a land bridge that connected to the Bering Strait. This theory is supported by genetic and archaeological data that indicates the migration happened no earlier than 32,000 years ago. Ancient Native Americans might have entered the New World via the Beringian land bridge and traveled south from Alaska through an ice-free corridor in Canada. Another idea is that they could have used boats to navigate along the coast of Siberia, across the Baringa land bridge, and down the Pacific coast of North America. Unfortunately, archaeological evidence from the area of the former land bridge or coastal routes has been lost due to rising sea levels. The paleogenetic analysis of Anzic I supports the Beringia hypothesis, showing that humans had reached Montana by almost 13,000 years ago. Since Anzic I was found on private land, Sarah Anzic didn't have to get permission from tribal members before analyzing the remains. She talked with representatives from several Montana tribes living in the area to see if she should use the necessary techniques, which would damage some of the material, to study its remains. However, because she couldn't reach an agreement, she paused the project for a while. Eventually, she went ahead with DNA testing on its remains. Once the analysis showed a connection between Anzic I and present-day Native Americans, the research team reached out to various Montana tribes for their input. In 2013, Eske Willerslev, a genetic researcher from Denmark, visited several Indian reservations in Montana to involve community members in the decision-making process regarding Anzic I's research. He met Shane Doyle, who later became a co-author of the study. Doyle, a member of the Crow tribe, is involved in Native American studies at Montana State University. There were differing views on the research done on Anzic I, but many tribal members expressed that they would have preferred to be consulted before any destructive methods were used, rather than afterward. The majority of Montana tribal members felt that its remains should be reburied following tribal customs. Sequencing ancient DNA has become much easier and cheaper in recent years, and it could help us figure out where many other ancient bones come from. Although remains as old as the Spirit Cave mummy are quite rare, there are many younger remains that don't clearly belong to any tribe. Scientists believe that through ancient DNA sequencing, these remains might now be classified as Native American and could be repatriated. The BLM announced its plans to repatriate the Spirit Cave remains and didn't receive any formal objections, according to Hockett. However, Jantz, the anthropologist who co-led the Spirit Cave skull study at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, is upset about the decision. He stated that it was a sad day for science. They will lose a lot of information about the history of human occupation in the Americas as a consequence. He believes that further molecular studies of the remains could reveal details about the Spirit Cave individuals, such as what they ate and what diseases they had. Jantz added that he thinks Willerslev is the last guy who is going to look at these things. Dennis O'Rourke, a biological anthropologist at the University of Kansas, wishes more researchers would follow Willerslev's lead and collaborate with Native American groups to decide whether to sequence ancient human remains, rebury them, or do both. Kimberly Tallbear, an anthropologist at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada, who studies indigenous perspectives on genetics, notes that researchers with O'Rourke's mindset are becoming more common. She argues that it's incorrect for scientists who oppose repatriation to assume that tribes are not open to research. She explained that tribes do not like having a scientific worldview politically shoved down their throat. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.